A rude cashier mocks a homeless man, not realizing he's about to change her life forever. When his past comes to light, she's forced to confront everything she thought she knew about kindness and judgment. Stick around to see what happens next. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. It was a cold, dreary morning when Mike shuffled into the small corner store. His clothes were tattered, and his face was etched with the wear of the streets. He wasn't asking for much. Just a cup of coffee to warm his hands, maybe a snack to settle his stomach. He stood in line, clutching his few crumpled bills, hoping they'd be enough. Behind the counter stood Lily, a young cashier, busy scanning items with little interest in what was happening around her. As Mike stepped forward to pay, he tried to make small talk, offering a shy smile. But Lily barely looked up from her register, her eyes scanning the items with an air of annoyance. "Is that all you have?" she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm, clearly judging the state of his clothes, his unshaven face, and his worn shoes. Mike hesitated for a moment, feeling the sting of her words, but then nodded, pulling the last of his change from his pocket. "Pathetic," Lily muttered under her breath, loud enough for him to hear. "Can't even afford a decent meal, huh? You'd think you'd be doing something with your life instead of begging for handouts." The words were like sharp daggers, cutting deeper than Mike could have imagined. Mike stood frozen, his hands shaking slightly as he handed her the money. But what could he do? What could he say? He was just a man struggling to survive in a world that seemed to have forgotten him. Lily took the money and slapped it into the register, her eyes still full of judgment. "Have a nice day," she said, but it was clear she didn't mean it. The way she said it, so cold, so dismissive, made Mike feel smaller than ever. Mike turned to leave, the door's bell jingling as he stepped outside. He hadn't asked for pity. He didn't want anyone's sympathy. But the humiliation he felt in that moment stayed with him long after the door closed behind him. But what happened next would change everything. Something unexpected, something that Lily could never have imagined, was about to unfold right before her eyes. 12 minutes passed, but for Mike, it felt like a lifetime. His feet dragged as he walked down the street, the chill biting into his skin. He didn't have a destination, nowhere to go. Just wandering, trying to keep moving, trying to keep his mind from drifting too far. Meanwhile, inside the store, Lily was still at the register, humming a tune and ringing up customers. She had already forgotten about the homeless man. After all, there were always people like him. People who never seemed to change, who never seemed to find a way out. In her mind, he was just another reminder of why she had worked so hard to get where she was, and how some people just didn't try. But then, something unusual happened. The door opened again, and in walked a man. Tall, well-dressed, with a confident stride. He wasn't the usual type of customer Lily was used to seeing at this hour. He walked straight up to the counter, gave her a quick smile, and placed a thick envelope on the register. "Excuse me, miss, can you make sure this gets to the right person?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Lily raised an eyebrow, glancing at the envelope. It was sealed with a gold wax mark, a sharp contrast to the usual bills and coupons that came through her line. Sure. What's this for?" she asked, a little taken aback by the oddity of it all. "It's for someone in need," the man said. "I'll be back soon." Before she could respond, the man turned and walked out the door. Lily watched him go, feeling a little puzzled. The envelope, however, stayed on the counter. It was heavy, and it looked out of place in the midst of the usual clutter, almost like a clue to something she couldn't quite figure out. Curiosity gnawed at her. She couldn't stop staring at it. Something about the way it was placed on the counter felt intentional, like it was meant to draw her attention. She picked it up, flipping it over in her hands, but there was no name, no return address. A few minutes later, the bell on the door jingled again. This time, it was Mike. He stepped inside, shuffling in hesitantly, glancing nervously at the counter where Lily stood. He didn't make eye contact, his gaze fixed on the floor. Lily, still holding the envelope, glanced at him. And for the first time that day, something in her softened. Mike didn't look like the same man who had walked out earlier. He seemed different, as if something had changed in him. His posture wasn't quite as defeated. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice a little quieter now. Mike looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time, and Lily saw something she hadn't expected. There was a calmness to him, an unexpected strength. Mike nodded, then took a deep breath. "Actually, I'm not here for the coffee this time," he said, his voice steady but low. "I came to pay for something else." Lily felt a strange pull in her chest. The man she had mocked earlier, the one she had written off as someone who couldn't possibly have anything of value to offer, was standing in front of her, not begging for help, but offering something she could never have imagined. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her confusion growing. Mike walked over to the counter, reached out, and placed a folded piece of paper beside the envelope the stranger had left. Lily's hand trembled slightly as she took it, reading the words that had been written inside. It was a letter, addressed to her. The letter told her the truth. The stranger she had seen earlier wasn't just some random customer, he was a lawyer. And the envelope on the counter? It contained a legal document. Mike was the beneficiary of a large sum of money, a fund set up years ago by a wealthy donor, someone who had been inspired by Mike's resilience, his ability to survive despite all odds. The man had quietly watched Mike over the years, keeping track of his struggles, and decided that it was time to offer a life-changing opportunity. Lily stared at Mike, her mouth agape. She couldn't believe it. The man she had ridiculed, the one she had dismissed as worthless, was now holding something that could change his life, and hers. She had mocked him, but Mike wasn't what she had thought. Far from it. But there was something else. The lawyer had also included a request. It wasn't just about money. It was about redemption. A plea for Lily to understand the power of kindness, to see people for who they really were, not by what they wore or how they looked. Mike's story was just beginning, but Lily had already learned a lesson that would stay with her forever. Lily sat frozen, the letter still in her hands, her mind racing. She had always prided herself on being practical, grounded, someone who saw the world for what it was. But today, everything had changed. The man she had mocked, the one she had dismissed without a second thought, had just taught her the most valuable lesson of her life. Mike's story wasn't over, though. He was already making plans. The letter wasn't just a ticket to a new life, it was a call to action. He was going to use this opportunity to give back, to help others in need, just as he had been helped. But more than that, Mike was about to become someone who would no longer be invisible, and neither would the others like him. "Thank you," Mike said quietly, his voice steady, but filled with an unspoken gratitude. He wasn't looking for pity, nor was he looking for praise. He just wanted to move forward. Lily, for the first time, saw him as a person, not a label, not an image, but someone with a story, a life that mattered. A person who had been through more than she could ever imagine. And she knew, deep down, that she would never be the same after this moment. The reality of her actions hit her hard. She had been so quick to judge, so eager to make assumptions based on what she saw on the outside. But the truth, the real truth, had been waiting just below the surface the whole time. Mike turned to leave, and for the first time, Lily spoke up. "Wait." Mike paused and looked back at her, waiting for her to continue. Can I help?" she asked, her voice uncertain but sincere. "I want to make it right. I want to do something." Mike gave her a small, knowing smile. "You already have," he said softly. "Sometimes, all it takes is seeing someone for who they really are." And with that, he walked out of the store. But this time, Lily didn't watch him go. She walked to the back of the register, set the letter down, and looked around the room, her thoughts swirling. She'd never looked at people the same way again. She had learned that kindness wasn't just about giving. It was about seeing, truly seeing, the humanity in others. As the days passed, things slowly started to change. Lily began volunteering at local shelters, using the money from the fund to support causes that helped people like Mike. She found herself thinking of him often, wondering where he was now, and hoping he was doing well. And the store, it was just a job, a small part of her life now. Her purpose had become something bigger. Mike's story wasn't unique, though. There were countless people out there, people who were invisible, not because they didn't matter, but because the world wasn't looking closely enough to see them. Lily had been blind to that, but now she saw clearly. So here's my question to you. What would you have done if you were in Lily's shoes? Do you think her actions were enough to make up for her earlier mistake? Or do you think it's harder to undo something once it's done? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story moved you in any way, if you've ever learned something new or seen the world a little differently because of it, I'd love for you to stick around. Hit that follow button, share this story with someone who might need to hear it today, and let's keep the conversation going.